Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are starting on page 3 of your student journal. Quick reminders, when I write in green, you go and write with me. When I write in red, you put down your pencil and just stop and watch. Okay, our objective for today, or our goal for today, is today I will. So you're going to notice that I'm going to shorten that. So today I will add and subtract decimals. Period. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I know many of you probably already know how to do this. Remember this, we're just going to be reviewing some important concepts. Okay, our vocabulary today, our first word is expression. It's numbers, symbols, and operations grouped together with no equal sign to represent a value. So I always think of it as like a math problem without the equal sign. So it could be as simple as 4 plus 2. That would be an expression because your equal sign is missing. Estimate means use whole numbers to arrive at a rough calculation. We're going to be doing that today as one of our steps. Sum is the solution to an addition problem, and difference is the solution to a subtraction problem. Okay, you're also going to notice the place value chart, and you're going to see that in some of your problems. We are actually not going to be using that, ladies and gentlemen, because using a place value chart, although it's a great idea, they're not going to often hand you a place value chart, so it would be a lot of work for you to have to create one. Okay, so let's look at our steps today. Our first step says we're going to estimate the answer by rounding the decimals to the whole numbers and then evaluate. So we are going to estimate, and then we're going to rewrite the problem in working form, line up the place values. I always think of line up place values, but also decimals. So we're going to line up our decimals. If you line up your decimals, then that already lines up your place values for you. So it's just an easier way to do that. Now, if you were ever adding or subtracting without a whole number and you didn't have decimals to line up, then what you would do is you would just simply add a decimal. So if you had a number like 15 and it didn't have a decimal, you always add it to the end because it doesn't change the value. So if you just had 4, then you would put the decimal at the end. So when you rewrite and line up the place values again, I just say line up the decimals is the easiest way. Step 3 says we're going to fill in our empty places with zeros. And we're going to place the decimal point in the sum or in the difference. So we're just going to bring down our decimal. I like just to bring it down with a line, and you'll see me do that when I do mine. We're going to evaluate the expression or solve. And then we're going to compare to our original estimate to see if our answer is reasonable. Just does it make sense? Okay, so what does this actually look like when we do it? Okay, I put down my green pen, which means you can set down your pencil and you can stop and watch for a moment. Here is my first problem, and it says 43 64/100 plus 126 3/10. So if I look at my steps, my first one says to estimate. Well, if I look and I want to round to the whole number, so 6/10 is going to make this round to 44. And when I round the nearest whole, which is the ones place value, 3 is going to make the 6 stay a 6. So I have 44 plus 126 is 170. So that was my first step, is I rounded to the nearest whole number. And now my next step says I'm going to be rewriting by lining up the decimals. So I'm just going to set up my problem, and I'm going to line up the decimals, which would then also line up my place values. And notice how I lined up my decimals. I always do the line through to make sure. Okay, my step 3 says fill in the empty spot with zeros. what I like to do is kind of create like this imaginary box. Just it makes it nice if there's created kind of this box around them. Okay, now it says to place the decimal point in the sum. I usually do it more in the beginning just to make sure they're lined up. My next step says evaluate the expression, which is to solve. So 4 plus 0 is 4, 6 plus 3 is 9, 3 plus 6 is 9, 4 plus 2 is 6, 0 plus 1 is 1. So my answer or my sum is 169 and 94 hundredths. And then my final step is check for reasonableness. Is that close to what I thought my answer would be? It's very close. It's only 6/100ths away. So I would say I'm correct. Okay, I'll do one more with you. Here's my next one. It says 102 and 7/10 take away 12 and 453 thousandths. Okay, so my first step is I'm going to estimate by rounding to the nearest whole, which means the ones place. So my 7 is going to make my 2 become a 3. So I have 103 take away. And my 4 is going to make my 2 stay the same. So 103 take away 12, and you could set it up vertically if you needed to do that. Okay, I am saying the answer is 91. Okay, so I'm expecting my answer to be close to 91. All right, step 2 then says I'm going to rewrite it by lining up my decimals, which will then line up all my other place values as well, as long as I'm very neat with it. And I said I like to do this step right away. Okay, my next step then says fill in empty spots with zeros. So everything's nicely lined up to create that kind of imaginary box right there. And then it tells me in my steps to do this, but I like to do that earlier. Now I'm going to evaluate the expression, which means to solve. 0 take away 3 is not possible, so I need to go all the way to here to borrow or to regroup. That becomes a 6. That becomes a 10, and then when I borrow from it, it becomes a 9. So I have 10 take away 3 is 7, 9 take away 5 is 4, 6 take away 4 is 2, 2 take away 2 is 0, 0 take away 1 is impossible, so let's regroup and borrow. 10 take away 1 is 9, and 0 take away 0 is nothing. So my answer when I go to check for reasonableness is 90 and 247 thousandths, which is very close to 91, which would tell me that I am correct then. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, let's try some together. We are on page 4 of your student journal. And like I said, we are not going to be using this because they'll never provide that for you on a test. So even though it might help now, it's just not a great habit to get into. Okay, so our first step is we are going to be estimating by rounding to the nearest whole number, which is a 7 here. So I look at I call it my bossy neighbor on the right, but is a 1, which means my 7 is going to stay a 7. So 567 plus, and I underline the digit I'm rounding to, which is my 3. My 9 is going to make my 3 go up to a 4. So I have 567 plus 4 is 571 is what we expect our answer to be close to. Okay, our next step now is rewrite our problem by lining up our decimals and place values. So let's line those up very neatly. Make sure your digits are all nicely lined up. And your decimals are lined up. Our next step then is we're going to add our zeros to create that imaginary box. Then we are ready to evaluate or solve. So 0 plus 2 is 2, 2 plus 7 is 9, 1 plus 9 is 10, 7 plus 3 is 10, plus 1 is 11. 6 plus 0 is 6, plus 1 is 7, and 5 plus 0 is 5. So we got for our answer 571 and 92 thousandths, which is very close to our estimate, which tells us we were probably correct. Okay, let's check our next one together. Again, we're not going to use this because they won't provide that for us on a test. So we're going to first start by estimating. So 567 and 12 hundredths. When I round it to the nearest whole, the 1 makes my 7 stay the same. So I have 567 take away. And when I round this to the nearest whole, the 9 makes the 3 go to a 4. So 567 take away 4 would be, we expect our answer to be about 563. Okay, and notice they are the same numbers as problem 1, except now we're going to be subtracting. Okay, so we're going to set up our problem by lining up our decimal, which will then line up all of our other digits as well. And then we're going to add in our zeros. Oops, I forgot to add that. And now we're ready to evaluate. So 0 take away 2 is impossible, so let's borrow. 10 take away 2 is 8. 1 take away 7 is impossible, so let's borrow. 11 take away 7 is 4. 0 take away 9 is not possible, so let's borrow. 10 take away 9 is 1. 6 take away 3 is 3. 6 take away 0 is 0. I'm sorry, it's 6, and 5 take away 0 is 5. So our answer is 563 and 148 thousandths, which is very close to our estimate. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you are going to be now completing some problems on your own. You can use the video to help you, or you could use our examples to help you. Have a good day.